Hello, it's Velma. I'm here today with a March so far wrap up. So in line with my new reading guidelines, I only have 3 books to talk about this month because I am trying to read less. The first one of which is The Ice by Laline Paull. I received this as a Christmas present. I did ask for it despite not really knowing what it was about. I read The Bees by Laline Paull a couple of years ago and I really enjoyed that, which I believe was her debut novel. So I was looking forward to this one. It is set in the slight future, a version of our world where the ice in the Arctic has all but melted or melted dramatically and opens up the region to big business and tourism. This is marketed as an environmental thriller and it certainly contains some lessons about what we can expect from the near future and how our management of the environment has some quite serious consequences. This opens with the discovery of a body in the ice, a man called Tom who had gone missing 2 years previously following an accident. We then shift to the protagonist, a guy called Sean Corson, and we follow his journey through the inquest into what happened to Tom, and then we have various kind of flashbacks as the story unravels as to what really ultimately led to Tom's demise. I could see what Laline Paull was trying to do here. It is an allegory almost for the mismanagement of the environment by humankind, but because of that the characters are fairly stock and never really seem real. They just represent different sides of this very complicated argument. The main guy, Sean, is almost like hyper masculine. This is a very masculine book, it felt, for a female writer. You know, he's a self-made man. He mixes with some questionable business types, but yet he came from a poor background. He's built up his own business empire. He's got a glamorous, gorgeous, intelligent girlfriend and everything going on. But behind him he has a shattered marriage and a problematic relationship with his daughter. Felt to me very much like a John le Carré type novel. It's not quite a spy or espionage tale, but it is definitely about sort of duplicitous, powerful players in a global game, and as such it's not really my kind of book. That said, there's a lot going for it. I thought the structure was very interesting. So although the mystery is revealed in flashback, it's not a linear flashback, if that makes sense. We kind of go back and forth to different time periods, and I thought that was really skillfully handled. Laline Paull is a beautiful writer, so the descriptions of the Arctic are really well done, and I would have liked to have stayed there a little bit longer rather than the UK courtrooms or the glamorous London pad that Sean seems to inhabit. Ultimately, I gave this 3 out of 5 stars, but if you are into thrillers or things with an environmental theme, I suspect you will enjoy it more than I did, and I would still seek out anything Laline Paull writes. I think she's a very competent writer. I just think this wasn't my book. Bear with me, guys, I've got a horrible cold. It's passing now, but I'm kind of aware that I sound very bunged up at the moment. The next book I want to talk about is The Shadow Year by Richell. This is, well, we call it backlist now, don't we, on BookTube, but it's an old book, okay? A friend lent it to me. It's about 5 years old, I think, which is ancient history to some of us. But yeah, this definitely fits into more of what you call popular fiction than literary fiction. I'm not sure where the boundaries are, but it felt like that kind of pick it up for a couple of quid in Sainsbury's type read. And I did enjoy it. So we've got a dual narrative here, and I love a dual narrative. You've got a scene in 1980 where 5 university friends find a tumble-down cottage in the middle of nowhere and decide to kind of take a year out and live off the land together. And then we see the interplay between those characters. Then we've also got a modern-day story of a young woman who has recently lost a baby and is struggling to come to terms with that and having some subsequent problems in her relationship. She receives a mysterious letter in the post with a key that leads her to this tumble-down cottage. As luck would have it, which seems a popular kind of device in this sort of fiction, she's an interior designer, so she doesn't have to actually take time off from work. She just goes to move to this cottage and starts to do it up and uncovers what happened 30 years ago and her personal links with the past. The key figure in the 1980 story is a figure called Kat, and she and her sister are 2 of the 5 people who live in the rundown cottage. She's not entirely a sympathetic character. We but we do know that she has links with Leela, who is the character in the modern day, and it's not too hard to work out what those links might be. This is a fairly paint-by-numbers standard mystery story. There aren't any massive surprises here, just the slow unfurling of what you know is coming anyway. I felt like the artifice wasn't particularly well concealed, so it felt a little bit cynical at times and like we were being manipulated to try and work out exactly what was happening. There was at one point where one of the characters says, "Oh, he looks like he could be my father," and then key names get kind of dropped in. So you know exactly how you're being paced to uncover the mystery, and I didn't enjoy that quite so much. But the writing was lovely. The description of this faraway place was beautifully done. It's a very slow paced but enjoyable read, and if you are more a fan of popular fiction, mystery, character-led stories, the characters here weren't completely likeable, but the relationships I thought were explored well, then I think you would like this one. I enjoyed it, but I don't think I'll remember it. Finally, I wanted to talk about The Mermaid and Mrs. Hancock by Imogen Hermes Gowar. Now, there's been so much said on this book all over BookTube that I'm not sure I have much new to add to the conversation. So if for some reason you've been living under a rock and you haven't heard of this book, it is set in Georgian London and tells the story of two main characters, Mr. Hancock, who is a ship's merchant, and the beautiful Angelica Neal, who is a high-class courtesan, and how their lives come into contact with each other and more than one mermaid. I share a lot of the criticisms of this book in that it was very overcomplicated. There were too many plots that weren't always well realised. There was some kind of jarring shifts in tone. It couldn't decide whether it was magic realism or not. It was a debut novel for somebody who obviously had a lot of ideas and struggled to fit it into one volume. I described it on somebody else's channel as being all fur coat and no knickers, but you know what? I didn't love it any the less for that. I really enjoyed this book. The writing is beautiful, and if you are a fan of historical fiction, it's always nice to see certain periods of history come to life, and Hermes Gowar does that really well. She is fantastically researched, and that with the skill of description really makes you feel you could be in these soirees and these ballrooms and these sweet shops. Some of my favourite scenes were set in sweet shops of Georgian London. The characters here are not simple. So Mr. Hancock and Angelica Neal, neither of them are particularly goodies or baddies or likeable or unlikable. We see them shift, we see them change, and they felt for very much everyman type characters. I love everyman characters in my historical fiction because it helps me imagine that I was there. The wider cast of characters as well I found really interesting. So my favourite, which I haven't seen mentioned in many of the videos, is the character of Mrs. Chappell, who's Angelica's former madam, and she was a very kind of overblown, dramatic-esque character, and she would glide into these various appointments with her gaggle of girls with her, and I thought those scenes were amongst the most entertaining in the novel. Ultimately, this is less of kind of epic blockbuster film and more of well executed Sunday night TV drama. It was a bit like, I suppose, like Downton Abbey. I loved it at the time, but I don't remember it now. And although I really enjoyed this book, I'm not sure how much it's going to stay with me. Don't have a physical copy because I listened to it on Audible, and that in itself is noteworthy. It was narrated by Juliet Stevenson, who's a very famous and celebrated actress here in Britain, and I've enjoyed a lot of her screen work. I listened to her narrate The Paying Guests by Sarah Waters a couple of years ago, and I didn't particularly enjoy that, and I do think that has something to do with Juliet Stevenson's delivery. She's very dramatic and manages to infuse every single word with meaning, so everything is loaded. So it would be she went to the shops, she bought an apple, some grapes and a banana. You know, everything has that feel of it, that it's somehow significant. But in a book like this, which is so verbose, you know, there's so much description here, that to try and put that much meaning into every single sentence just became really grating. So the only way I was able to listen to it was on double speed, because like most of us, I read much quicker than I listen anyway, and sometimes audiobooks feel like they're going to take weeks to listen to. I recommend this book? Yes, I would. I think if you like historical fiction, large, grand stories or big books, there's a lot going for it here. I suspect Imogen Hermes Gowar's next book will be more refined, but you know, as a debut novel goes, this is a great read. That's it from me. Thank you very much for listening. As always, if you've read any of these books, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below and what you thought of them, particularly The Ice. Nobody else seems to have read The Ice by Laline Paull. That's not one I've seen mentioned much over YouTube. So have you read it? Do you want to read it? Let me know underneath. Okay, speak to you next time. Bye.